Hello and welcome, Just a Family. This is giving you something to talk about, or Just a Live TV. I'm your host, Melissa Krechler. Today we're going to be talking about co-creating the final chapter, and I am ridiculously excited for this topic. If you are watching, catching live, or watching the replay, please follow, like, and share this episode. Go and check us out on the website at justalivetv.com, where you'll find all of our episodes, all the ways that you can become a part of our show, and just share the awareness. And our sponsor today is a Phoenix Identity, who is helping you take the Phoenix journey. So the Phoenix of the journey is when you burn everything to the ground, metaphorically, of course, burn everything to the ground, reclaim your identity, and recreate a life that is in your image with your self-expression. So speaking on that topic, and again, you can go check them out in the link in the description, but speaking of that topic is today's topic, co-creating the final chapter, which for many of us, and as we get through this, will be a very interesting concept. And I am loving this concept, even though right now I don't practice it because I'm still in the anger stage. But for me, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Joelle. So please do before I get started.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share this, what seems kind of, I wouldn't say embryonic work, but I'm kind of creeping, maybe even crawling with it in terms of developmental stages. And so, so just a little bit about myself. My name is Joëlle Lydon, and I am a relationship expert and coach. And I'm so excited to be talking today about co-creating final chapters with actually relationships with family of origin. And so the work that I tend to do tends to be romantic. And so this has been so exciting to me to be taking the work that I'm doing into such a different area and to provide healing for myself and my family of origin, while I bring that then to my clients for them to do the same with theirs. So this has been like super uber exciting, because how you deal with family of origin is how you do all your relationships. So it's kind of juicy.
Absolutely. And so for anybody watching, again, and I hope you don't mind me sharing that before we started this episode, we set the intention for this episode, because this episode could potentially be very controversial. So I'm going to start off explaining a little bit about my back history with family and where I sit today, and why this topic was one that I really wanted to highlight, not just for myself, but for everybody else, because it is a very, I don't want to say new age, but it is a very different way of thinking. And I absolutely love it. And it's powerful and vibrant. So I come from a very large family, or two very large families. I was born and raised, and I lived with my mother for many, many years. Didn't have the greatest relationship with my father. There were a lot of issues with that. He has passed away. He passed away when I was 16. I did show forgiveness, which now I think about it and I'm like, oh crap, I did. Okay. So I did show forgiveness in his final chapter. But with the chapter with my own mother right now, my mother, in my opinion, I'm not a medical professional, and I'm sure she and the rest of her side of the family would disagree with me, that my mother, in my opinion, is an undiagnosed narcissist. And I don't throw that around very often. That's not something, I do know that it is very rare, but in my case, I hold a lot of angst and a lot of anger and a lot of frustration with not only her, but everybody she's come into contact with that has completely cut me off. My entire family cut me off based on her words and her beliefs and her emotions. And if she truly is a undiagnosed narcissist, a lot of what she has said has either made her the savior or victim. And that's what I grew up with. She was always the savior, the victim. Nothing was ever her responsibility unless it made her look either like the savior or the victim. So that's mine. And like I said, mine is still pretty fresh. I still have a lot of angst over that, and I'm not ready to co-create any chapters with her. But you're doing that. And that is powerful, to not only be able to forgive yourself. And let me backtrack for a second. I hold gratitude for not only my mother, I hold gratitude for my family. They taught me lessons. She did raise me. She birthed me and raised me. And I wouldn't be here living if it wasn't for her. She did raise me. I did have food. I did have clothes. It was the mental, emotional, and all of that. So we'll leave it at that. But when it comes to where I'm at now, again, I'm not ready to do what you're doing. And if you're willing, I'd love for you to share what it is exactly that you're doing that's got me all like Twitter pated.
Well, I so appreciate your share on the background of like where you're at and the why. And I would say that my story is fairly similar. Just, it's a different, same suit, same person, different suit, right? Or same people, different suit, right? And I think we all can, or many of us share that experience of feeling that things didn't go as we had hoped when we were growing up. And in fact, we were given all kinds of things to deal with that probably were very unfair on us as children. And so then grew up with this sense of like, okay, the only way that I can deal with you people is to create distance. And for me, that distance came in the form of an ocean. My family lives in France. And so having an ocean between us was very convenient as a first step of being able to cut things off. And then for myself, over many, many decades, I went through periods where I would just like not even talk. 8 years would go by, 10 years would go by. I had different like sections of like, maybe I'll step back in and see if everything's okay, if I'm okay around them. Will I still have that sort of like self-imploding experience that happens from being around that toxic environment? Let me see. And so that really was a stage that anger, blame, judgment, shame, all of that around family of origin, and then recognizing the complete disconnect, the addiction, the bipolar disorder, mental disorder, depression, like all of it, and finding my way with it, wanting to have a connection with them, but not knowing how to, feeling that sense of overprotection and armoring for myself. And so it took a really long time to get to where I am, which is actually with them now in this very peaceful space where they get to show up in every way that they want to show up because that's who they are. They've not changed, but I have. And to be able to co-create with them their final stages peacefully. Like over the last 6 months, I've traveled to France 3 times. I just placed them in a medicalized nursing home. I just got back 3 weeks ago, and they're now in a medicalized nursing home. Of course, the work is not finished. We got to clean out the house. We got to sell, clean it and sell it. But to be in this stage where I can be in their presence and in the presence of my siblings, because they were also very enmeshed in all of it, in this very peaceful place. But in fact, not just peacefully, but show up as the leader in my family to co-create these different kinds of connections that could have never been had before, had I not done the healing work that I have and brought it to this situation and also to my clients.
Yeah. So now I understand that. So I'm an identity coach, right? And I focus on mindset, and it does, I understand the thought process behind it. I understand that we are only in control of our own thoughts, our own beliefs, our own way of thinking, and our own reactions, right? Our emotional responses and reactions to those in our lives. Absolutely. I do understand that. And so I understand the concept of controlling your reactions, your responses, how you engage with them, what you engage with, what you don't engage with, how you can hold yourself in an area of peace while engaging with them. I do understand that logic. And I value that logic, because everybody should practice that logic in everything, right? Just because we're having an issue with somebody, that's our issue, right? We can't expect other people to change. One of the biggest quotes that I ever told one of my family members and one of my loved ones was, I can't expect you to change for me. I can't expect you to change. But at the same time, you can't expect me to stay in your life. And I think that right there is where the difference for me would be, is the ability or the right to say, you know what, I can hold space for you. I can love you and hold gratitude, and I can control myself when it comes to you, but I don't have to be a part of your life. I don't have to have you in my life, in their life, and in whoever's lives, right? And for me, I'm at that place where I can hold space. I can hold gratitude. I know that my mother was available for my son when I wasn't, and I hold gratitude for that. I am grateful to her for that, because she was there. And I can still hold a lot of that positivity and that lot of happiness. But at the same time, I can choose that her behaviors to me are too much for me. And something that I don't want to live with. And I don't want to have to battle, right? I did make the decision to not have my youngest children be a part of her life. My two younger children are not in contact with her. And the older one of the two, I've explained some of that and just said, you know what, like, I'd love for you to make your own choice, but at the same time, that trust is not there with, her, not with my daughter, but with my mother, right? And I saw what happened with my son and I when she got involved, and I wasn't willing to deal with that anymore. So
yeah.
For somebody in my position, what would you suggest? Would you suggest, like, I'm always for, do what's right for you. So absolutely, if your way doesn't work for me, then obviously I would do what does, right? But if you had a client such as me who is in this particular situation, what would be your suggestion?
So first of all, I'm just gonna kind of highlight some things that I heard you say. One was you using the word, I understand. The other one was using the word, I understand the logic, right? And then I also heard you use the word control. When I hear the word understand, so I'll get to your answer to your question in just a moment. So when I hear the word understand, when I hear the word logic, and when I hear the word control, that tells me that it's still a very intellectual construct for you. And that the readiness for you is not there.
Mm-hmm.
That is a stage. We need to move through the separation, logic, understanding, logic, control stage. So what I would say to a client is this something that you are open to, willing, maybe not now, but in the future? Does that seem like, in an ideal world, you would want peace around all of this that does not involve control, that does not involve logic, has a lot of understanding, but is actually really a knowing that doesn't involve effort anymore, no efforting? So if this is something that feels like you may not be ready for at this moment, but are open to the idea of, then awesome, let's talk. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see how we can get there step by step. And it's not going to be an overnight. As I shared with you earlier, this is decades. to get me here. More importantly, it's been the last 20 years that I've actively worked, and more specifically, the last 10 that I've actively worked on arriving here. And it's had to take that understanding, the logic, the control, all of the things that I needed to do that created a lot of energy, that took a lot of energy to be able to be in this place of like just showing up with a sense of peace and effortlessness without control.
Yeah. And I think, I know that that I get. And you're right. You do have to be out of your mind. For me right now, one of our draw a line to where people that hurt us can come close to us and get out of your mind. I think for me in my situation right now is it would be a lot of work, right? It would be a lot of work, not just to safeguard myself, but also to safeguard my children and, safeguard the things that, and another little part of backstory is I've been in and out of her life since I was 14 was the first time that I left, right? And it's been consistent since then. It'll be great and then not great, and great and then not great, and then great and then not great. And I've tried, and I'm not saying that I've been perfect. I absolutely haven't. Obviously, I can be quite reactive. But at the same time, it's how many times, for me, it's how many times do I put myself through that, right? How many times do I say, I have this yearning for that relationship, and I'm not going to deny that I have had that yearning, right? Most girls want their moms in their lives. They want that mother-daughter connection. They want to be, even girls and their fathers to have those relationships. And I learned at a very young age that I wasn't important enough. And that was something that stuck with me for a very long time, was I wasn't important enough to create that relationship. She didn't put any effort into co-creating the relationship. And again, I don't fault her for her choices. She made her own and I made my own, and that's where we are today. But at the same time, I don't know. And you're right. I'm not ready. I am not even anywhere close to being ready to allow that. Even while you were saying that, and the thought of futuristically, would I be ready? And I'm not going to share a comment I made to my husband. But, when all my children are adults, and maybe, right, when they have a sense of their own identity and what they're willing to put up with and what they're not willing to put up with, and they're capable of protecting themselves and protecting their heart and their mind without my influence on that, right? That's always one thing. I never wanted to be the influencing factor. I never wanted to be the one that said, you can't like this person because I don't, right? I was never that. My oldest is 20 this year, and he has a relationship with her. And I don't fault him for that. I don't make him pick sides. I don't try to, I try to avoid the topic as much as I can. But he's entitled to the way he feels. And so I do put a lot of focus on that. So
understood. So I think one of the things that I shared with you when you and I connected was that at some point in my life, I made a decision. I kind of drew this invisible line, right? That whatever this is, right? This stuff that I'm carrying in me, that feels like big luggage, no matter what I do, where I go, how many meditations I do, how many retreats I go to, how many workshops I take, how many mentors I work with, it's always there. And so I made that decision that I'm drawing the line. I'm not taking this one to the grave.
Yeah.
So that for me was motivational, because that was one aspect that this is for me, not for them. Right. So that was step one of the decision-making process. From that, eventually through the process of working with it, and I love that you mentioned your children, was this sense of like, I want to model for my son, who's 27. I want to model for my son a woman who trusts herself. Even when it's difficult, even when it's emotional, even when it's messy, even when it's toxic. I want to model for my son a woman who knows herself so well, she can never be shaken off, taken off her center, even by the very people who knocked her off in the first place. Because I want my son to know that that is possible for him. If I did not do the work with my family of origin, I imagine on some level, what I went through with my parents, he might repeat with his own father or with myself. And I wasn't willing to co-create that with him.
Yeah.
So it was more important for me to co-create with myself, a really clear, anchored grounding. So then I could then serve and support the very people who, as you said, could give a rat's ass about me, because they do in their way. But every time that I had an expectation that they would show up any different than they ever have, that's when I had pain. So for me, the work was around agreeing, approving of them exactly where they were without needing to change them one iota, and trust that with that approval and with that agreement of who they were, I would be safe.
Yeah.
That I would still be okay, that I could go in there open-hearted, and that I would actually, my self-care is my self-protection. My trust is my self-protection. My confidence in myself is my self-protection. So I have the capacity to go into that environment and not be shaken.
That's extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. And I think I I love how it sounds. I love that you're able to create that. And I love that you're putting that into place. I think I'm so stuck on the logic again, on the logic that, I can let go of that anger. I can. And, maybe eventually I will. It's always harder to work on yourself than it is to help others work on themselves. So I'm still holding.
But I would
on
also
to
disagree with that, Melissa. I would say, like, the work that you do for yourself is actually an investment and a benefit to the clients you work with. So the deeper you're willing to go, the deeper you can take them in their healing and be of highest service to them. So your willingness to go there, right,
Yeah.
is actually, if you're really, truly, that's what you're called to be, of service, then your willingness to quote unquote go there is the greatest gift you could offer, because then you have the generosity to give it and pay it forward in all directions of time.
Yeah. That makes sense. That does make sense. And we all are always working on ourselves, right? And it's not that I'm not working on myself. Again, I'm still dealing, and I think my issue is not that when I say that eventually I will work through that, and it is sometimes harder to work on yourself, especially when you're still dealing with it. You know what I mean? My husband and I are still dealing with repercussions of allowing that relationship to be in place. and very negative repercussions that we are still trying to deal with and sort out and that aren't resolved. And so when you still have a lot of that reminder, right? It's like you cut your finger. Let's just say you get injured. You do something stupid, you get injured, right? And every so often, every so often you go to move and you hit that injury, right? And it's that constant reminder that you've injured yourself, right? Eventually it'll become a scar and you're not feeling that pain anymore because it's healed, right? Unfortunately, I'm in the place where it's not healed because every so often I get a reminder that it's still there. There's still more to deal with. There's still more to put aside. There's still more to figure out. But yeah, you are right. As once that's done and able to do that, for sure. I don't walk around constantly thinking of my family. I don't walk around constantly thinking about how much anger I hold for them or anything along those lines. But absolutely, my belief right now is still anger. My emotional reaction right now is still anger. And you know what? Until that gets resolved by me, by my actions and my thoughts and the processes that I have to go through, that is where I am. So for anybody watching, it's okay to still be in that anger. Absolutely. It is okay to go through those processes. Neither one of us are saying that you aren't supposed to go through those processes.
No emotional bypasses at all. Exactly. You cannot skip to where I am. What you're talking about, Melissa, you absolutely have to go there, right? And it's almost like I'm reminded of Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, right? Where he talks about like that pain that we carry and then we wrap, but then we wrap that and then we wrap around ourselves. But when you hit it, it's like, and we wrap so much around it thinking, oh, like it's not there. But the moment we hit it, it's just like, oh yeah, it's there. And no matter how much protection we wrap ourselves in, right? And it can be whatever shape that takes for you, right? Addiction or distraction or, eating or, crazy behavior, pushing yourself, whatever form it takes, it's still overprotection, right? And so like anger is a stage in the process of, right? Yeah. So no emotional bypasses, please, because the only way to get to here is to like sit in that messy, angry, shame-filled, revolting space with a willingness to take the next step. Mm-hmm. That's all that's needed here. Is there a willingness? So that's why when you ask me, like, what do you tell the client? Is there a willingness? Because if there's an opening, if there's just even the slightest crack of an opening, then this is possible for you. Mm-hmm. But all you have to be willing to do is just take the next step. We get all caught up and overwhelmed with like, oh, I just have to get to where Joelle is, right? And that's just like, right? Will send us to the hills. No, all that's needed is your next step, whatever that's meant to look like. I'm going to say this right now. I did not do this on my own. There were therapists and mentors and coaches. Like at no point did I just did not sit under a bodhisattva tree and then just, or whatever, just a tree and just meditate. And for me this just did not happen that way. It kicked my ass on many occasions, but it was not done alone. And I do not recommend that any part of this work be done alone. My recommendation is therapists, mentors, coaches who've been through something like this, not just talked about it, not intellectualize it, but actually been through it. So they can hold your hand through that hero's journey, if you will, heroine's journey, because you have to have somebody with you who's walked that path, not just talked about it or intellectualized about it.
Yeah. Somebody who knows the process, the actual process to healing. And you know what? I'm just like you. I deal with trauma and I deal with, right? And I work with people who everything comes down to trauma. It's like, it's whether it's little trauma, big trauma, medium trauma, whatever, right? You can get a grande latte, it doesn't matter. Everybody's going to deal with trauma in one way, shape, or form. And you're right. It is important to have somebody helping you through, and even multiple people. I love how you said counseling and therapy and coaches and all of that. I've had every one of my clients has been through therapy, and every single one of them said, Melissa, there's just something more that you do that changes it, right? Yeah. And it's learning coping skills. It's understanding your reactions versus your responses, your mindset, your emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, energetic, all of that. It's understanding how you work at a core level, and understanding and being able to shape and mold your own thoughts, your own beliefs, your own variation of healing, because we don't all heal the same. We all go through similar processes, but we don't actually process the same way, right? The stages are similar, but the processing is completely different. Your situation with your parents, my situation with my parents, two completely different situations. The stages are similar,
correct,
but the way you think about it and the way I think about it are completely different, right? We may go through it and it'll stay completely different, and that's totally fine. Every person watching, whether you feel you can do what I commend and am absolutely emphatically happy with Joelle for doing, I am nowhere near a place where I can do that. So it's okay. It is absolutely okay. But if you do think that you are able to create those next steps, then look into that for sure, because we all deserve to have a life filled with forgiveness, happiness, peace.
Yeah.
You know, the life bus is going to hit us anyway. Whether we are filled with peace right now, the life bus is going to happen. It's going to be like, hey, you know, now there's something new coming your way that you need to deal with. Mm-hmm. We all have that anyway. Why make more for ourselves than we need to?
What I will say though, like at different stages of this process, I kept thinking and asking the powers that be, the divine powers that be, like, why do I keep getting called to do this? Why? What's the purpose of getting called to do this? And it was like a calling. And so, you have to know that on some level for yourself, this is not work for the faint of heart. This is not work that you force yourself into just because out of obligation or civic duty or familial duty or socialize or good girl conditioning. Like, none of this applies here, right? You have to be willing to do it because your heart, your soul is calling you to resolve it in some level. And for me, it was just like super clear when I drew that line in the sand of like, I am not taking this shizzle to the grave with me, just not happening. And I'm not going to be taking this and then handing it over, this luggage that I'm carrying. When I shuffle off my mortal coil, hand it over to my son. Not happening, not on my watch. And like, I'm super clear on the fact that when I do this work, I actually not only just heal myself, but I heal his legacy. And I heal the legacy of all the grandchildren, great grandchildren I will never even meet. That I, in doing this work, get to heal their legacy too.
Yep.
So it's so deep for me.
Yeah, and that looks different for everybody. My own son, again, and if you want to catch my episode with him, you can find that on YouTube and Facebook only. The first episode we did before we officially launched was with my own son and I. And him and he went down a very similar path to mine in his early teens, and we didn't speak for 2-3 years. And during that time, he lived his own life, did his own thing. And again, when I said that she was there for him during that time, she absolutely was. And I do show gratitude for that. But we came together again, him and I, and we healed those wounds. We talked, and we candidly talked, and we talked about his feelings and my feelings and where we're at now and what we wanted to create together. So I ended up co-creating with my son rather than my mother, right? And I
It's
chose.
so interesting because you already have evidence of the possibility of it happening for you,
Yep.
just because you were able, right? So like any little step that you were able to take in service of healing relationship, because that's the work that I do, right? Because how you show up in your relationship with your parents is how you show up in your other relationships. The way that you get triggered by your parents, your family of origin, your caretakers is just how you're going to get triggered by your boss, by your best friend, by your little kid, by your child. Like it's just going to happen. So if you get to heal it with your family, then then you get to heal all the relationships in your life, right? So the fact that you have evidence that you did it with your son is evidence that you can do it with your mother. Just saying, planting that seed, let it germinate, let it grow, might not, but just, really be clear on the fact that you did it with your son, you can do it with your mother. A Course in Miracles says, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. And let me just back up the truck and say by miracles, the Course in Miracles defines a miracle by a shift in perception. So there is no order of difficulty in miracles. None is small, bigger or larger than the other. All expressions of love are maximal. This is what we're talking about here in this work, is an expression of love. So if you did that expression of love with your son, it is also possible with your mother.
Yeah. Yeah. My response to that right at this particular moment, because we're being honest and open about this, my current response on that is there is no love there. Right now, that flip side of the coin, it's completely, and I don't say that very often because there are many, I understand and I accept and acknowledge many things. But in that situation, I can clearly say that that I don't feel that right now. Not in the slightest. So yes, I do. But again, you're right. I did do that with my son, and I did that with my, my younger children. And, I facilitated when he left and he went through that stage, it changed my parenting. Because one, I didn't want to be like her. Two, I wanted to make sure that my children felt loved and acknowledged and respected for who they are. I started coaching when he left because that's when my transformation happened. That's when my awareness shifted and I was like, oh, now I understand. Now I understand his point of view. I understand my point of view. And I delved into the world that I had been living in for 30 years at that point and went, I'm pretty good with mindset. And I knew how to change it. And so I did. And I created something that was more beautiful and more lasting than anything. My relationship with my son now, he tells me everything. I tell him whatever he wants to know. And, he knows I have his back and I will always be there for him. No matter what he does, no matter what he chooses, he is his own human being and I will love and respect him no matter his choice.
Yeah. Well, it's just, it's important to know that it exists within you.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you choose or not.
Yeah.
The potentiality of what I'm co-creating with my parents, what I'm co-creating with my siblings, because it was like all one package. Throw the siblings in there too, right? the potentiality of what I've created, like, is absolutely available to you. And as I shared earlier, is just because I hear you use words like not yet, which tells me there's willingness.
There, and I'm not the type of person to say never, because
Right.
there is no never for me.
And what
And
it's meant to look like for you is going to be different from if that's something you decide on, right? And this is for everyone listening. If this is something that you decide on, it's going to look very different, right? As you shared, there is a roadmap, if you will. But the way that we take the path, the way that we amble, the different, the different attentions that we place and intentions that we place at different parts of the journey are going to look very different for each one of us. But what I will say is that this has changed everything for me. The way that I'm engaged in my marriage, the way that I engage with my friends, the way that I do business, the way that I engage with my clients, the way that I show up is unarmored. And that is just so incredibly freeing, that the work that I happen to be doing with these two people who could have given a rat's ass about me actually impacts everything else in my life in a way where I'm using way less effort, having way more impact.
yeah, that I totally understand. My friendships, my relationships with everyone has completely shifted into I love and respect you where you're at. Do I react? Do I respond? Do I like, your expectations and your behaviors? Not all the time, but that's who you are. And I love and respect you regardless of the things that I might not like, right? And again, it comes down to, I have no right to expect you to change or even ask you to change. I need to love and respect you for who you are and choose whether I want you in my life or not, right? And that, I think, that for me is kind of where it comes down. It's funny that you mentioned siblings, and I'm not going to share my sibling story, but at the same time, I'll share a little bit of my view on that. Is before this happened in my sphere, it happened with my siblings. And for a good 10 years, my sibling didn't talk to my parents, had no communication, and even went so far as to tell people that they were deceased. And all of a sudden, that relationship was reignited. I had urged a little bit of the reigniting. I don't know what created the reignite, because when it reignited, my relationship with my sibling became non-existent. I still don't understand to this day what happened. It could have been something I said or did. I have no idea. And I will be the first one to take responsibility when I've intentionally done something or unintentionally done something that has caused anger or upset. But as soon as that relationship rekindled, mine with my sibling literally became non-existent, to the point where I messaged them a couple weeks ago and said, I haven't talked to you in a few years. I was just thinking about you, checking in to see how you're doing, and nothing. And you know what? It does hurt. I won't deny it. I will admit that it hurts, right? It does hurt. And I always call them sheeple. My family tends to be very sheeple, and everybody kind of just goes with, they pick sides, and they don't acknowledge or do any research to find their own conclusions. They just kind of go with the train of what everybody else is doing. And I've ended up being the brunt of that train, where I have no communication with absolutely any of that side of the family. None, not even one person. Well, my nephew slightly, but other than that, there's none, zero communication whatsoever. And it hurts, right? we're raised to believe that blood is thicker than water. We're raised to believe that we need to, and this is where I fight that belief a little bit, is we're raised to believe that blood is thicker than water. We have to love and honor everybody in our family because they're family, because they're blood, because we're raised for them, with them. But then we also are raised that we have to put up with their abuse. We have to put up with their toxic behaviors and their lack of empathy or feeling towards us, right? How many people right now are struggling with, the lack of acceptance from their loved ones? And for me, I'm in a mentality where it is, I don't have to have them in my life. I don't have to feel sad because they've chosen not to be in my life. I'm creating something. I'm creating a beautiful and amazing life that works for me, and I'm happy with it. Is there still a little bit of sadness? Every so often, but that's natural. That's normal. It's human psychology to, have those emotions of lost connections and lost family and just lost abilities.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely part of the process, and many of us have to go through the process of choosing family, right? Of choosing family, because the one that we were given or that we were born into, even though there was a sacred contract, until you figure out what that sacred contract was, right? You find other people, communities that will bring that sense of belonging and love and trust, kindness, and absolute respect, and respect for you as an individual. So then you can then grow yourself up around the nourishment that is provided by communities like that, by mentors, by coaches who can provide those kinds of environments for you to begin then to grow your trust, your sense of center, your sense of value, your clarity with, like, I absolutely belong on this earth, right? So that's definitely part of the process for sure. And in the work that I do, one of the very things, so the way that I do the work that I do is that obviously there's coaching involved, but coming from an educational background, I provide trainings for my clients based on the trends that I see them, that I see in them. I'm like, oh, they're all experiencing this. Let me do a training on this to then support them. And one of the first trainings that they receive is really focused on personal and energetic responsibility.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that I don't want to be indispensable. I want you to grow. I want you to, like, at one point go like, yo, Joelle, I don't need you anymore. Cause really all the tools that I have are not just here, but they're here, and they're in the actions that I'm living out every single day, and in the responses that people are having toward me, and everything in my life has changed, right? So that aspect of, looking at what are the stages of development in growing yourself up means that on many levels, you actually have to grow down. You have to grow roots.
Understand that.
Yeah.
You do have to go back. You do have to understand your core, the root of who you are. And that comes down to our thought processes and our beliefs. And for many of us, a lot of those beliefs of who we are not true, because it's what other people have put into place. Right? You're not worthy. You're not good enough. You're not, you have to be this way to be loved. Or I know people who think that they're worthless unless their life is perfect, and that's not a way to live. I grew up trying to find unconditional love. I grew up That was the one thing I grew up trying to find, was unconditional love and acceptance. And my family was incapable of that. And still are incapable of that. If they don't agree with you, they don't like you, right? They want nothing to do with you. And so I strived my entire life to create space for unconditional love. And at 15, I wanted to be a mother because I wanted somebody in my life who would love me unconditionally. Like I knew I was capable of loving them. And I didn't end up having him until I was 19, thankfully, but still going forward, I found a partner who loves me unconditionally. He might growl and complain and bitch because this is the type of man he is, but he loves me unconditionally, and he shows me that all the time. My children, the people I surround myself are unconditional, right? I found, and it's my mama, and I've differentiated, she is my mama. And this woman, since the day we met, has loved me, accepted me, encouraged me, and just been there for me unconditionally. Whether she agreed with me, whether she agreed with my actions or my background or she has loved me more than ever. And I'm so grateful and I'm so blessed to have found my family, because my family is the one that I created.
Exactly. Yeah. And to find those models of mother, right? Yeah. For me, for part of the work that I did was like finding the models of couples, right? That were a representation of the kind of coupling that I wanted. For me to find the mother or the mothers that were a version and evidence that mothering in the way that I wanted and desired and deeply longed for was actually possible. There was evidence out there of its potentiality and its potential, and therefore I could have that too. Right? So that's part of this work, really deeply part of this work. So yeah, it's all so good. And possible.
And we need that. And I think you and I are both creating that avenue for other people, right? And I know, and I can only speak for myself. I know that on this show, that's one of the things I highlight is unconditional love, acceptance, support, gratitude, the ability to be okay even though you're not okay, and hope in the dark, and inclusivity and diversity, and knowing that you don't have to be what anybody else wants you to be, and that anything you want to create is creatable, right? I created my ideal family, and that worked for me. I created space for my ideal partner. I didn't create him, but I created space for my ideal partner because that's what I truly needed and I truly wanted, and he fit that for me. And I think people just don't understand. They have the ability, they have the right, they have the capability of creating any change within themselves, within their life, within their surroundings that they choose to, if they do the process, right? If they know how to make those changes and they know how to ask for what they need and create space for what they need, because just like you, right? You created space for that healing, for that forgiveness, for creating that chapter. You create the space for that. They didn't do that. You did. You created space for yourself to get that healing. And again, that's why I commend you for doing that. It's so unique and so amazing to hear that somebody's actually done that, shown the forgiveness, accepted them for where they are, been able to be in their life knowing that you don't have to protect yourself anymore because you just accept the way that they are.
And this is also a process. My mother has Parkinson's. She will die. She may not even live the rest of the year. Who knows? My father, he will die. So there will be another completely different stage to this entire process for me. I'm not even sure what the grieving process is going to look like. Right. So like I haven't arrived. I'm at a spot. I'm at a spot, but I haven't arrived, right? That myth of arrival is just like what keeps us thinking that we're like incomplete and not enough. But when we just get to acknowledge that I am at this X marks the spot, it happens to be at a really kind of cool, interesting place in my life. Like, never thought I'd get here, right? This is all the stuff that I did to get here, willingly, consciously, step by step. It didn't happen overnight, right? But then just recognizing that, like, we have this over culture belief of when I get this, when I have this, when this is in my life, then I'll be happy, right? So just want to put it out there that this is a spot, and there will be another spot and another one beyond that. And they will continue lining up like a string of pearls until the day I die, right? And the day you die,
That's the
and
end
the
goal.
day everybody else. But are you willing to take the next step to find the next part of the journey for you?
Yep. I totally agree. And I love that you said that, because it is, everybody has the same end result. We all die. Everybody's
It's inevitable.
I'll be happy when. No, you won't. Okay, I'll be happy when I lose 60 pounds. Okay, you know what? I'll probably be pretty proud of myself when I lose to 60 pounds, but then I'm going to be kind of pissed off that I have to go shopping for an entire new wardrobe.
Well, because the needle keeps getting moved to the next thing.
Right? Exactly.
It's the biggest lie.
Yeah, there's always going to be something more until you die. And that's the end goal for all of us, is we are taking a journey, each individual one of us, every one of you listening, Joelle and myself, we are all on the same journey to the same destination. Nobody gets out of that. The journey itself, that's the fun part. The journey itself, that's where we learn and we experience and we grow and we love and we hate and we eat and we, like, the journey is the beautiful part. Even those negative moments, right? Those negative moments, those springboard you forward to the next stage. They springboard you forward to the next experience, the next goal, it's never ending until it ends.
And each of those stages reminds you you're alive.
Mm-hmm. As much as they suck. as much as they might suck in the moment. Yeah. It's always in the moment. I love that. All right. Hello, Ghost Floof. So is there anything you'd like to add before we get going? Because I know that we're coming up to the hour mark here.
What I would say is just honor your stage of development. Be wary of comparison. Mm-hmm. You are there, I am here, blah, blah, blah. I've got so much, right? Comparison to other people, to where you ought to be, a future version of yourself, because that's just going to really slow down the process for you. And what I would say is that you only need to back up the truck. You need two things if this is something that calls to you. And the first, we've mentioned a number of times, willingness. And the second is a willingness to take the next step. That's all that you need. Step by step.
Yeah. So Ghost Sleuth says, we don't feel alive unless we bruise. The bruise in this context, basically saying anything you don't like is simply a sign you are moving forward. I would actually counter that and say that the bruise is actually the sign to move forward.
Yes.
Right?
It's a signal.
It's the signal. When, and I'm going to get philosophical on this for a second. When we are given a situation, a thought, a belief, an experience, when we're given something that we don't like, that is our sign that something's not working, that something needs to be changed, something needs to be done differently. I can't remember who said it, but the famous quote that you keep trying to get the same result by doing the same thing is going around in circles. It's not going to change. Yeah. You need to try something different. You need to understand that it is okay. And that's Albert Einstein. Okay. Thank you. I didn't know that. But at the same time, it's that springboard effect, right? Where we have to go down a level and say, okay, this is really not working for me. I'm not happy. It's time to change that. For people who are, insanity is repeating the same action, expecting different results. Yeah. But the people who feel insane, speaking of that, the people who feel insane, the people who feel like they're going in circles and don't know who they are, don't know where they're going, don't know what steps to take, and are drowning in that level of unhappiness, those are the people who have allowed that sign to go unviewed. They have allowed that sign, and no shame, because not everybody knows how. And that's why people like me exist, where I teach you how. And Joelle that's our sign of, okay, this doesn't feel right, or I don't like this, or I'm not happy with this. Instead of just leaving it where it is, that's a sign to say, okay, so how can I change this, right? If your relationship's not working, you need to internalize and say, okay, what's not working, right? What don't I feel good with? What don't I like feeling? And how can I change that internally? If I can't change that internally, see if somebody else can help you change that. See if, sometimes you have to ask yourself if the relationship is meant to last or if you want it to continue forward, right? There's so many different cycles of that. And it's understanding you, because we can only put our actions, our beliefs, we only control ourselves. And that's part of creating that change. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, the signal's a signal for an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And a gift inherent in that situation. So are you willing to approach it, to investigate, do research on, run tests around?
Yep. That's how we get cures.
Yeah.
I coined the phrase, negativity is the catalyst to positive growth. And that is exactly what it is. It is the catalyst to positive growth. When you're going through negativity, it's time to grow. And you can create positive growth out of negativity, any one of them. That is a guarantee I will make, that any negative thing can be changed into a positive by changing your perspective, and changing how it impacts your life. Are you willing to move forward even if you'll get bruised? Absolutely. That is a very good question. And if people aren't, then they're not ready. And to work with me, you have to be ready. Or you have to be close to being ready. I refuse to work with anybody who is not ready to do the work, because like Joelle, I don't want you to need me. I want to work with you for 3 to 6 months, year tops. And then you say, I'm good. And I say, you're good. Go, just go. I'm here if you ever need me, but go, because you'll have the tools, you'll have the knowledge, you'll have the techniques. You will have the mentality to know how to help yourself in every situation. Yeah. All right. Well, Joelle, and I keep trying to pronounce it properly with Joelle.
C'est Joelle.
And I can't do that. I foreign languages, and even French, because I am in Canada and French is in Canada. I am horrible. I cannot
Well,
roll
that's
my
actually not really French. Just saying.
okay. My last name is my married name, and it's Krechler, but it's actually Krechler. And if you were in Prague, it would be Krechlerkova.
Mm.
So yeah, because female in intonation. So or connotation, I can't remember. Anyway, yeah, so it's definitely different. I love different unique names. My maiden name was a very popular name. It was like Smith, but not. There were too many Melissas in that with that last name. So I am very unique. There is not another Melissa Krechler in the world, and there are only 6 Krechlers in Canada, and they happen to all be related to me.
Cool.
Yeah. So I love unique. I love unique. Can I pronounce? Okay. Now, don't get me started. He posted a name and he's trying to see if I can pronounce it. I'm usually really good. I'd say Zariel, but I might be wrong. It's Zaireal. Zariel. Very nice. I like that. Okay. Joelle, thank you for joining me on today's episode. I really appreciated this episode. I knew it was going to be quite the episode with the different thought processes, and I absolutely love it. I think that it is a fantastic thing that you're doing, and I hope that, and I hope more people can find that healing and that peace within themselves by working with you, or just even giving themselves the grace to know that, you know, they can and start that process. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really an honor and a pleasure to have this opportunity and the space to be able to talk about all of this. I know it doesn't necessarily land for everyone. Not everyone is ready for it, but at least beginning to contemplate or see that there is possibility is really exciting to me. And especially when one looks at how this affects all relationships in your life, then that excites me even more.
Absolutely. And it is. And that's one of the things we love to highlight on the show, is that there are so many different possibilities, so many different perspectives, and things that we just don't talk enough about. And this is one of those things. And so thank you again so much for joining me. For everybody watching or catching the replay, please go and like and follow the show, share to your followers in your own social media. We are always looking for guest speakers, guest bloggers, featured topics. If you'd like to see a topic featured on the show, we are all about building a community of inclusivity, diversity, judgment-free, safe space to share your stories, share the things that maybe we don't want to talk about, and just highlight the fact that we are all humans having human experiences, and that looks different for all of us, but none of us are alone. So make sure that you take that with you. Today's episode has been sponsored by Phoenix Identity. They are offering you the journey of the Phoenix, which takes you from metaphorically burning it all to the ground and saying, I don't like this anymore, reconnecting and reclaiming your own core identity to recreate and take control of your life and create it in your image, your way, because who doesn't want to live their life their way? So I wish you all an amazing evening. Please go and join our newsletter at justalivetv.com. You can reach either myself or Joelle on the links in the description. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful night, evening, day, week, whatever it is. And I will see you on the next episode.